Welcome back to the Just Grill and Outdoor Living channel. I'm Sam. In today's video, I'm going to show you just how easy it is to smoke a brisket on your Kamado Joe. Brisket is one of the most requested topics we get for Kamado Joe. It can seem like a daunting undertaking, but I'm here to tell you it's very easy. Whether this is your first attempt or you're just struggling to nail it, the goal in today's video is pretty straightforward. Let's just make a good backyard brisket on our KJ. Let's get started. The key to a successful brisket cook really starts with your cook prep. And I don't mean just trimming and seasoning the brisket. What I'm about to go through, I think, is probably one of the most overlooked aspects when cook planning. Do I have all of the right tools to make this a smooth cook? Obviously, we're gonna need charcoal. The question you should ask yourself is, do I have enough? Typically, you shouldn't need more than a fresh 20-pound bag, but it's good to check you have enough on hand should you burn through that a little bit faster than you might anticipate. You also want to make sure you're using a quality lump charcoal with medium to large pieces. A quality lump charcoal is going to burn much cleaner and longer, produce less ash, and be more consistent in temperature with this type of cook. I recommend starting with fresh charcoal in the firebox versus reusing charcoal from another cook. Now I know that sounds wasteful, but you don't have to necessarily throw that previously used charcoal away. Put it in a storage bin, mix it in with another cook after this one. A lot of what I'm gonna say is in another video we made on how to use your Kamado Joe. I highly recommend checking that video out too after this one. So airflow is of the utmost importance, so let's make sure that we have cleared out all of our ash before we start cooking. This gives us the best chance for no airflow problems to start. Something else you need to ask yourself is, do I have a good grasp on controlling airflow in my grill? If you have struggled to manage airflow properly up to this point, I would recommend investing in a tool, one that I'm going to use today. That tool is the Fireboard 2 Pro. It's a digital thermometer unit that's going to track the internal temperature of the brisket, but I'm also going to use it to control the airflow with the fan add-on accessory, and it's going to do all of this for my grill. So what other tools do you want to have on hand to make sure your cook goes smoothly? You'll want to have high heat resistant gloves to be able to pick up the brisket later in the cook. You're going to want to have a drip pan to put underneath the grates to catch the grease drippings. You're also going to want to have a long slicing blade when it's time to slice up the brisket. The last thing you're going to need is either aluminum foil or butcher paper for when that brisket stalls out to help it push through that stall. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this obviously, but the quality of beef you purchase does also make a difference in the final product. I don't recommend buying top of the line if this is your first time doing a brisket, as it's an expensive cut to buy, so it's better to learn on a lesser grade, and if you mess up, you're not out a whole ton of money. Now let's talk about trimming. This is an area that people can get hung up on. Don't overthink this part. On the underneath side, there's a layer of fat that needs to be removed because it just won't render down no matter what you do. It's just too thick, so that's all we need to really cut off. The best advice to give you at this part is just go by feel and don't gouge the meat. So what I mean by that is, if you're cutting through the fat and making it to the beef, you've just gone too far. You can always cut more fat off at the end of your cook. So when in doubt, just leave a little bit more on there. Personally, I think the best brisket has a little bit of fat on there, so I don't trim very much off when I cook mine. I'm not going to be adhering to any competition styles, different things that you see different pitmasters do. We just want to make a really good backyard brisket today, and we're going to keep it as simple as possible. And that's what you want to do on your first cook. So everything looks really good on our trim. It went really well. It's time to inject. I think this helps give your brisket the best chance to stay moist on the inside. Now, it's totally optional if you don't want to do this. Now, when injecting, you want to make sure you inject with the grain and you keep your hand over the needle when injecting. This is going to protect your eyes, and it's also going to help keep your kitchen a little bit cleaner too. As you're injecting, you're going to notice the brisket swells. Just move the needle around an inch or so every time you want to move it throughout. Now, for seasoning, you can really use whatever you like on beef. You can use a binder like mustard to help the seasoning stick, but again, that's optional. I'm always trying different seasonings. We offer a lot of great brisket seasonings in our store and online, so make sure you check that out as well, or come see us for some great recommendations. When it comes to seasoning, layering is very underrated. I like doing this and think it adds a ton of great flavor, but that's entirely up to you. You can use one seasoning, you can use two, you could use three. It's always up to you. So we're all seasoned up. While all of that's going on, we do need to get our grill up to temperature. We really want to target 225 degrees. That's optimal for a long smoke like this. If you're short on time, you can go up to 275 degrees, but personally, I think anything over that really starts to compromise your end result. Now, some might argue otherwise, but that's just my take. In today's cook, I'm gonna use the SloRoller, and the startup process is similar if you're using the heat deflector plates. When our grill gets to 225 degrees, we're gonna let it stabilize for 10 minutes. This is something I cover in our video on how to use a Kamado Joe grill. The worst thing you can do is not let your fire stabilize. Remember, the Fireboard fan is gonna do most of the work for us on this cook. So the grill's ready. All we have to do is get the charcoal lit. I'm gonna be clipping my ambient probe to the rear of the grill. It's gonna be out of the way of the brisket, and it's gonna help get the right temperature for what we want during this cook, since the Fireboard is gonna be doing all of the work. Our bottom vent is controlled by the fan entirely, and we're just gonna open our top vent a smidge to keep as much smoke inside this grill. If you're not using a device like this, you'll just need to find the perfect placement of the lower vent and top vent that keeps the grill stable at your desired temperature for the cook. But you will need to monitor it periodically. Once the grill is stable at the ambient temperature you want, it's time to put the brisket on. We're gonna put the brisket on fat side down. We're doing this because of the setup of the grill. This isn't like an offset where the fire is much further away from the food, since the fire is indirectly underneath the meat on this grill. Fat side down or up is a major debate, so you're welcome to try it both ways, but I recommend fat side down. If you're wanting to use wood chunks for more flavor and smoke, now would be the time to put them in before putting the brisket on. I'm gonna use a few maple chunks and drop them right in. So how long is this cook gonna take? That's really gonna vary cook to cook, and based on a lot of factors like the cooking temperature and the size of the brisket. The rule of thumb is anywhere from a half hour to an hour per pound. My best advice is to typically plan for the longer time to give yourself more time. There's a rest period we also need to account for at the end of the cook. That's why I recommend the longer time. So once we put the brisket on, we've got the Fireboard set to alert us once the internal of the brisket reaches around 160 degrees. That's when we're gonna look to wrap the brisket. What we're really looking for is the stall. This typically happens anywhere from 150 to 170 degrees. The stall is when the internal temperature of the brisket just seems to stop climbing for a while. Sometimes this can be more than a few hours. So the wrap is to help induce the brisket to keep cooking. I'm always monitoring the app, so if I notice it stalls before 160 degrees, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it. So don't be set on 160. If it stalls in the 150s or a little bit after 160, that's when you want to wrap it. Now this is also where the foil versus butcher paper debate comes into play. It's up to you on which one you really want to use. I like using butcher paper because it lets some of the moisture out, but it does not steam the brisket from the inside down, so it helps protect your bark a little bit better. But again, that's a conversation or a debate for another day. Once the brisket's wrapped and you put it back on, we're gonna look to pull the brisket around 203 degrees internally. Some people will say earlier, some people will say a tad later. This is gonna be up to you. You're the one eating the brisket. I like 203 degrees, so that's what we're going with here. Once we pull the brisket, we need to let it rest for at least an hour so the juices inside can redistribute throughout. 2 to 3 hours is optimal. So through our video magic, we have a brisket that's gone through everything we've just talked about and has been resting for 2 hours. Now don't forget, when you're done cooking, to shut down your grill by closing off the top and lower vents. I just leave the brisket in the butcher paper and put it in a cooler. You could rewrap it with fresh paper if you wanted to, or you could wrap it in a towel. There's a lot of different ways to do this. It's up to you. That's just the way I do it. I think the cooler is easiest for most people. So now let's slice into this. We want to slice against the grain, and the grain does change directions about halfway across the brisket. If you've seen people start by slicing the brisket in half, this is why they're doing that. I'm going to be using the Woosoft brisket slicer today. It's designed to be able to cut through in one long fluid motion, no having to saw back and forth. So let's recap our cook overall. It took about 14 hours from start to finish, and we didn't have any issues with airflow, and we didn't have to add in any more charcoal. The cook was pretty stress-free and mild, so I hope this video is helpful and gets you going in the right direction. If there's something that I did not cover in this video or you have a question on, just leave it in the comments below and I'll be sure to answer it for you. If you're in the Tampa, Florida area, just come see us in our showroom. We'd love to talk Kamado Joe, brisket, anything barbecue with you for that matter. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that way you get notified of more great videos like this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.